What is going on, YouTube? Today's video is going to talk about my two favorite things, writing and hip-hop. Specifically, what writers and authors can learn from hip-hop and its industry, and how they can relate to traditional publishing and self-publishing. But before we get into it, if you have never seen me before, my name is Ryan David Ginsberg. I'm the author of The Crumbling of a Nation and Other Stories, It Was Just Another Day in America, and my upcoming debut novel, In the Algorithm We Trust. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about mixtapes. I wrote about mixtapes in the second introduction to my book, It Was Just Another Day in America, and this is what I wrote. The philosophy behind mixtapes, or so it has always seemed to me, is not to show the artist at the peak of their game, but rather to give the world a peek of who the artist is in their rawest forms. And for many artists, especially those who have not yet made a name for themselves, mixtapes are their cry to the industry, to the world, that says, I demand to be heard. In other words, mixtapes are typically released by rappers before they have signed to a label, and they're typically placed online for free in hopes of starting to build a fandom. And almost every big rapper you know today started with mixtapes. J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Mac Miller, Nipsey Hussle, Lil Wayne, Drake, Future, and the list goes on and on. And it is because of those mixtapes that the industry ends up learning about these artists. Because when it comes to a mixtape, usually not a lot of money is put into them. But when it comes to an album, hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars are put into their production. And because so much money is being put into producing that album, most labels do not want to take a chance on a rapper that they don't know about. And the same thing happens in the writing industry. There's traditional publishing and there's self-publishing. You can look at self-publishing like the production of mixtapes. And you can look at traditional publishing more like a studio album. For self-publishing, it is entirely funded by the author, while traditional publishing is entirely backed by a publisher. And it is because of that that most authors want to go the traditional route, myself included. But similar to record labels being hesitant to spend all of that money on an unknown rapper, the same thing can be said about traditional publishers and unknown authors. But if a writer is able to create enough buzz through self-publishing, in the same way that rappers are able to create that buzz through mixtapes, they may be able to gain the interest of traditional publishers, in the same way that rappers were able to gain the interest of a label, where they can then produce an album. And there are several very successful authors that have done this. Andy Weir self-published The Martian. M.L. Wang self-published Blood Over Bright Haven. E.L. James self-published 50 Shades of Grey. Rupi Kaur self-published Milk and Honey. And the list goes on and on. And each of these artists, because they first self-published, were able to make the jump into traditional publishing. Before we go any further, I do want to emphasize that I am not arguing that every new writer should self-publish, because the self-publishing industry is really, really hard. Because it takes lots and lots of time and can cost up to thousands of dollars. For example, my last book, The Crumbling of a Nation and Other Stories, cost me around $3,000 to $4,000 to produce, while my novel, which I'm putting a lot more money into, is going to end up costing me over $10,000. But even with spending all of that money, my reach is going to be extremely limited when compared to a traditional publisher. Which brings me to my next comparison, radio plays versus streams, and bookstores versus online sales. When we were talking about studio albums, we talked about that marketing that helps to push the album out. One of those strategies is the radio. Record labels will pay for their artists' music to be played on the radio. This now gains them access to all these new fans. When it comes to publishing, the radio is kind of like physical bookstores. It is significantly easier to get a traditionally published book in a bookstore than it is for a self-published book. And that is because traditional publishers have a lot more power, have a lot more influence, and have a lot more money. But again, let's go back to some of those artists that we talked about who started with mixtapes. We now hear all of those artists on the radio, which means that they must have been successful enough with their mixtapes. Earlier, we talked about how they place their music online for free for fans to listen to. Another thing that they do is they push their content strongly on social media, which then brings me back to self-publishing. If you are going to go the self-publishing route, you need to be online. You need to be making videos like this on YouTube, you need to be on TikTok, you need to be on Instagram, you need to be on all of these places that are rotting our brain. Because at the end of the day, it works. I only started making content online maybe 2 years ago. And since then, I've been able to publish these books and get thousands of sales, even without any of my books being inside of a store. Because today, more than ever before in any time in history, we have access directly to readers. In the same way that hip hop artists have direct access to fans, to listeners. Okay, so let's try to bring this all together. I know I've been all over the place. This is what happens when you don't write a script and you just kind of go off the cuff. We as authors can look at what hip hop has been doing for decades as a way to evolve to our new world. Because 10, 20 years ago, traditional publishing was the only route to go if you wanted your books to be read. But the world we live in today has changed. It has evolved. And we don't need to create a new roadmap, because hip hop has already done it for us. And if we rewire the way that we look at self-publishing, it can guide you in your career in the future. Instead of seeing self-publishing as some sort of failure or giving up on the traditional publishing industry, look at it as a way of introducing what your skill sets are to the world. Because sometimes that's all that the traditional publishers need to see, that your skill set is there and that you are able to sell books and that people want to read your books. And then maybe they'll be willing to give you the funding you need to create your studio album. I hope that you were able to take something from this video. If not, thank you for letting me talk about books and hip hop. Like I said at the beginning of this video, those are my two favorite things. And if you're interested in more videos like this or any other videos talking about books, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. And please check out all my other socials. I have them linked below. I also have the links to my books below as well. But that's all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.